Hey everyone, this is Sandeep and welcome back to Learn React in 10 Days course. So this is a course where I'm making 10 videos, 10 different days. You can take this course and learn React in depth in 10 days. So I have already covered day 1, 2 and 3 and today is a day 4. If you haven't watched all the previous days like 1, 2, 3, I highly recommend you go and watch those videos. Link is in the description. That is a playlist link which will take you to the actual playlist of this React course. But you can watch this video independently as well because you know inside of one video I'm trying to cover one topic in depth. So today, in day 4th of Learn React in 10 Days series, I'm going to talk about lifecycle methods. So in the previous day, like day 3, we talked about class components. And today, class component as well as state. So today we are going to talk about one more feature like we talked about state, one more feature of class component called lifecycle, lifecycle methods. So let's jump into the presentation and I'm going to give you a brief idea about class components like we covered in the previous video, T3 video, what a class component. So class component, we know like it returns JSX. It returns the JSX output based on the input. And what are the input? Input are props. So JSX output can be configured using something called props. And we talked about state system. So if you see like some of the props which are going to change over time, right, that's a good candidate for converting it into a prop, into a state, sorry, into a state. So prop can be converted into state. So we talked about state system and we talked like whenever the state is going to change, the React component is going to re-render. So it is going to return new JSX output based on the new state and props. And today we are going to talk about lifecycle method. So I'm going to cover, so basically there are two parts to it. So in the first part, I'm going to cover most widely used lifecycle methods. And in the second part, I'm going to cover some of the lifecycle methods which are not that much used, but I think we can discuss about it. Maybe if someone asked you, what are those methods, you should have the answer. Maybe like someone asked you in an interview, but I can tell you 99 or 95% of time you're going to use only three lifecycle method, and we are going to talk about those three lifecycle method. The other three which are like less likely used, we are going to talk about that also. And obviously we will continue to work on a digital clock. So this digital clock we have created in day 3. We made the clock ticking, the clock working. In this video, we will continue to build. So we will extend our digital clock to show reminders. So this is just, for the practice purpose and to explain lifecycle method in a simpler manner. I have created this example. So say suppose it's 12 o'clock. When the digital clock is going to have 12 o'clock as a time, it's going to show us a reminder it's lunch time. So let's go for a lunch, something like this. So this is what we're going to make in this video. So this video is really going to be exciting. And without further ado, I think we can quickly get started, and let's get started with the lifecycle methods of React. So let me first of all tell you about what is a life cycle. So we can take the example of human being, right? We do have some life cycle, like we born and we like up to the age of 25. Now I'm saying it just for the sake of example. Don't take it personally. So like till 25, we go to college, we go to school, we study, we go to college, and we go for a job, right? After that, we get married, right? After 25 plus, we get married, we we have children's, and like after 60 plus or 70 plus, we die, something like that. So I'm just giving you some hypothetical scenario. I mean, not the real scenario. It can vary person to person. So we as a human being has some life cycle, right? So like we are a component. If you think yourself as a component, we have a life cycle. Similarly, when we create a class component, it's nothing but an object, right? The class component is nothing but an object. So that class component also has a life cycle in React. So they have created those life cycle, or I can say a simple word for a life cycle is event, which I'm trying to show you here, right? Like it's a series of event which are happening when your component is getting rendered into the DOM, or when your component code is actually getting executed inside the browser, that JavaScript. So you can think of lifecycle is like an event. So we can divide a React component lifecycle into three major events. Just remember this. You just need to remember these three major events. One, two, three. So the three major events of React component lifecycle are mounting, updating, and unmounting. So you just need to keep repeating, like this can be a very good interview question also. So to explain all of this, just start like this. So there are three major events: mounting, updating, unmounting. Keep saying it repeatedly in your mind, mounting, updating, unmounting. And we are going to see each phase or each stage individually in detail. So there are like three stages: mounting, updating, unmounting. But these three stages are again subdivided into small stages or small events. So you can say mounting is one event, one major event, updating is another major event, and unmounting is another major event. Inside those major events, we have some small events also. Like in case of mounting, what happens? In case of mounting, the first thing which happens is our constructor function gets called, right? So constructor function is a good place to initialize a state. That's what we have talked in the previous video, right? So we use constructor to initialize our state. So these are all basically sub stages of mounting, right? Constructor function is going to get called first. Then immediately after constructor function has been executed, render method gets called. So these are nothing but series of functions getting executed, right? Constructor, then render. So render is basically for show UI based on props and state. We already know how to input props to our JSX and how to use state also. So render, basically what render does, it takes the recent props, it takes the recent state, combines and produces a JSX, which is like an output for our component in the DOM. That's what we see in the browser. And then after the first render, now this is really important. After the first render, React component lifecycle or React behind the scene calls another event or another method or another sub event called component did mount. Okay, and this is a good place where we can make some API calls. So later on, I'm going to talk about how to load data from server side using some API. So component did mount is a good place where you can have all those calls, where you can make all those API calls to load the data from the server side. So this is actually the purpose of component did mount function. Got it? So mounting stage, the major stage, is actually divided into three sub stages. The first one is constructor, second one is render, and third one is component did mount. And we know, like, we use constructor for initializing the state. We use a render method to show UI based on state and props. And component did mount we can use for making API calls. So I have give an example of house here. So think like your mounting stage is like building a house from scratch, like you're building your house for the first time. That's what I can call is a mounting stage, where you have started building your house for the first time. So think like this. So this can be a real world example. Now let's see in practice like how this mounting stage actually work, and we are going to see this mounting stage how it works in our digital clock. So For the simplicity, I have already created a project called Lifecycle 04-Lifecycle. This is a project I have created using npx create react command. Okay, and this is running in the browser. So you can see our digital clock is running here. If you see here, right? And that project is already open inside my Visual Studio Code. So I have all those files from the previous day. And by the way, all of these files are actually on GitHub. There is a link below in the description part of this video. So you can go and refer the code from that particular link. So let's start from scratch. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to remove this set and let me go back to the state where my clock was not ticking basically. So let's start from scratch where we will just show the initial time. So I'm going to remove this set interval call for the time being, and let me put it into notes because we will need this later on. So probably I'm not going to use notes. I'm going to use text edit for that. And let me create a new document and I'm going to put some code snippet here. Okay. Now I have my constructor. I have this get time string. And so we're starting from the scratch. Let's say, suppose I have created a class digital clock component, which extends from a component. So if I go back to my, and if I save this, and if I go back to my application and refresh, we can see like the current time of my machine, right? And let's go back to our mounting stage. So let's see how mounting stage practically work in the code. So the first function which gets called is a constructor function. So I'm going to put my console.log here and I'm going to show you how it is working. So I'm going to type constructor here. So this is the first method which is going to get called. So constructor, I'm going to put one more log inside my render method. And I'm going to say render. Okay. So when this digital clock, so where it is actually going to start, it is going to start at the index. So inside my index, what's going to happen, this app component is going to get rendered. Okay, and inside my app, I'm creating this digital clock component. So this digital clock component code is going to get executed and it is going to start executing from top to bottom. So the first function which is going to get called while this code is going to get executed is called constructor function. And immediately after the constructor function, if I go back, right? Immediately after constructor function where we are initializing the state of our application, the render method is going to get called. So based on my current state and based on the props which I have passed as an input, render method is going to return me a JSX. And that JSX is what you see in the DOM. So let me save and go back to my application and I'm going to clear my console. Let me refresh. See that? The first function which is getting called here is the constructor function, right? And the second function which is getting called is a render. So this is how our mounting stage is working, right? Constructor and then the render method. Now we are going to use this function. I'm going to put component did mount function inside my React app or inside my digital clock. Let me write one function called component did mount. And we are going to see this function is going to get called just after the first render. So I'm going to put console.log and I'll say component, or I'm just going to write mount. Save. Now, if I go back to my application and let me clean my console and let me refresh. See that? Constructor, render, mount. So this is how the mounting stage works. Whenever first time the component is going to get, the component code is going to get executed or the component is going to render inside my DOM, these are the sequence of function which are going to get called. The first one is constructor, the second one is render, and third one is a componented mount. And these functions have specific purpose. Like I have mentioned, you can use constructor for initializing the state. You can use render, and obviously render you have to use. This is going to return the UI or JSX based on the props and state. And you can use componented mount just after the first render to make the API calls to load the data. And we are going to use component mount for our case. Now in our digital clock case, we are not going to load any data because our clock doesn't require any data, but there is a good candidate. We have a situation where, we can use component mount. And what's that situation basically? So right now my clock is not ticking, right? I have stopped it from ticking. It's not working. It's not showing me the recent time. So to do that, if you have seen, like I have used this function, right? This set interval. And previously I have put this set interval as a part of constructor only. Now I'm going to take this opportunity, after the first render, because first time when I'm rendering my digital clock, I'm showing the current time, right? From my state. Now I'm going to use component mount. So after the first render, I'm saying, hey, mount, you start ticking my clock. So we don't have a scenario where, we need to go to the server side and load the data, but we have a good candidate of ticking our clock. So why not use component mount for ticking our clock? Right? So this is going to set the interval, and this interval is going to get called, not the component mount. This interval function is going to get called after each second, and this will tick our clock. So if I go back to my application now, do you see that? Our component, our digital clock is ticking now. And you see, like render method is getting called again because the state is getting updated. So as I said, whenever the state is going to get updated, it's going to trigger the render method. So quick recap around the mounting stage. So mounting stage is actually divided into three sub events: constructor, render, and component mount. We use constructor for initializing state. We use render for showing UI based on props and state. And we use component mount to make server-side calls, API calls, or like how we tick our clock. So these are some of the good example. So think like you're constructing your house for the first time. So this is about mounting stage. And we have seen like how we can use constructor, render, and component mount function inside our code, right? The sequence. So this is on mounting. This is a practical example of using mounting. I think this is a good time to take a break, have a quick revision about mounting stage of React, where we call constructor, render, and component mount. We'll move on and we'll talk about the next major stage of component. And let's do that after a quick break. Welcome back. So before going on a break, right? We talked about three different stages of component lifecycle, right? So there are three different stages of component lifecycle in React. The first one is mounting, the second one is updating, and third one is unmounting. So this is what, first of all, you need to remember. Now we talked about the mounting stage and the different methods which gets called when that stage is executing. Now let's move on and continue this video. And in this video, or in this part of the video, I'm going to talk about the next stage of component lifecycle that's called the updating stage. So I'm going to go back to my notes. So we talked about mounting stage, constructor, render, component mount. These are the different methods which gets called, and we saw the purpose. Like we can use constructor for initializing the state. We can use render. Obviously the render is used for showing the UI based on props and state, and component mount can be used to make API calls. Now the next stage, the next major stage which gets triggered is called the update stage of a component. And obviously update is going to happen when these three different things are going to happen basically. So when we receive a new prop, when we set the state of a component, or there is a method called force update which you can use to trigger the update stage. So we are not going to talk about force update for now, but Like if your component receives new props from the parent, the update stage is going to get triggered and it is going to call the render method. When we set state of a component, so when we set the new state or we change the value of the state object, it also triggers the render method. And when we call the force update method, it also triggers the render method. And after this render method in the update stage, it calls another method called component did update. Like in case of mounting, it calls component did mount just after the render, just after the first render, if I want to be specific. But in case of update stage, after each render, it is going to call component did update. So we have already written a render method. Now we will see how we can use component did update. Now what's the purpose of component did updates? Where we are going to use this method. So again, this method can be used for making API calls. So say suppose I'll give you one example where say suppose I have input field in the form and say suppose I'm searching something to load some data from the server side like the cat data, dog data, tree data, any data, right? So first time I enter something, maybe I'm going to use component did mount, and after next change in that input field, maybe I can use component did update. I'm just giving you one example here, but it is really simple. Both component did mount and component did update method can be used for making API calls. Now, did update can be used to make API call based on new data, but component did mount can be used for initial props or initial state, which we define in the constructor function. Okay, so this is about mounting and update stages. So like I told you, update is only going to trigger. First of all, mounting is going to happen. This constructor render component did mount is going to get called. Say suppose I receive a new prop. Say suppose I set the state or I do the force update, then render is going to get called. And because of that, next render component did update is going to get called. So it's really easy. Let's see how we can use this component did update. So I have a very good scenario where I'm going to give you the example where you can use component did update lifecycle method to do something, right? So we have a very good scenario, right? Our clock is ticking, right? If you see our clock is ticking and say suppose like at now it's 3 p.m. probably. Yes, it's 3 p.m. now. So say suppose at 3:30 I want to take a break. So that's like a reminder, right? So my clock is ticking, it keeps ticking, and at particular time, so it is updating, right? So initially my clock in the mounting stage, my clock has been initialized and it started ticking. Now it's updating, right? So after each update, say at a particular time, like at 3:30 I want to take a break. That's a reminder, right? So I can check the state continuously and at a particular time where I want to do something. So that's like updation of state, right? My component is getting updated and at particular state of that component, right, I want to do something else. So for that purpose we can use component did update method. So let's see that. First of all, we'll see like how all of these things are happening in a sequence. So I'm going to remove this for now. Let's go back to our code editor and I'm going to remove this set interval call for the time being. So I'm going to just comment it for the time being. Okay. And I'm going to introduce one more method here called component did update. Okay. So component did update and I'm going to put console.log here. I'm just going to log the component did update and update. So let's see when the mounting stage happen. After mounting stage, does component did update method gets called. So I'm going to save it. And now our clock is not ticking because I have removed the set interval call, which is basically setting the state for my clock. So I'm going to go back and refresh my application and let's see the sequence of events which are happening. So you see that like the constructor is getting called, then the render is getting called, then the mount. So what's happening basically only mounting stage is working. The constructor, render and component did mount, and component did mount always gets called after the first render. And I have set the state only one time here inside my constructor. That's why render got called. And because of that render method, this component did mount gets called. Now I'm not doing anything. My clock is not doing anything. I'm not setting the state. I'm not passing new props. That's why, this component did update is not getting called, because the update stage of my React component is not getting triggered from the external forces. And what are those external forces? New props, state change, or calling a force update method. Nothing is happening. That's why the render is not getting called. That's why the component did update is not getting called. So component did update gets called only after the first render. That's a thing you can remember in your mind, right? Component did mount gets called after first render, and after every render after the first render, component did update gets called. So let's do one thing. Now let's tick our clock. So now, as I'm ticking my clock, what's happening basically, I'm setting the state. And if I set the state, that's a trigger, right? To trigger to start the update stage. Because of that, so what's going to happen immediately after the set state gets called, render also gets called. Because of this next render, this component did update is going to get called. So now each time this because of that set interval, the clock is going to tick, because of that render is going to get called, and because of that component did update is going to get called. So I'm going to save this. And now if I go back to my application, see that render, update, render, update, render, update. Why this is happening? Because this second, like every second, my state is getting changed. So the set state is getting triggered after each second. Because of that, the render, because of that, I'm seeing the new time in the DOM, right? In the display. And because of this set state, the render is getting triggered. Because of that, I'm able to see the clock. And because of that, this component did update is getting called. Now let's use this component did update to show the reminder. So we're going to show the reminder. So let's see how we can show the reminder. Before I show the reminder, basically, we need to refactor our clock code a bit. So I'm going to do that, because if you see here, if I come back to clock, this 1 is showing, right? We should show 0, 2, and even in case of minute also, we should have 0 here, right? So I'm going to create a utility function for that. I'm not going to use any third-party libraries. I'm going to write the utils.js file here. And inside that utils file, I'm going to write a function called const pad, which is going to accept the value as an input. And it's going to check if value is less than 10, it is going to return zero plus value, else, or I'm just going to use return value. So I'm checking whether the value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm just going to append a 0 before it. So now I'm going to use this utility function. So let me export this function first. So I'm going to export pad function here. And I'm going to import that function, pad function, inside my digital clock. So import pad from /utils. So this is how you can write your own utility functions in a separate file, and you can import those functions inside any component. So I'm going to use that pad function, and I'm going to do some refactoring around my get time string function also. So I'm going to create variables for all of this, right? So I'm going to create some const for r. So I'm going to have this getar function here. I'm going to create one more for minute, and let me copy and paste this one here. I'm going to create one more variable for seconds. I'm going to copy this one here. So this is a really good practice. First time you write your code the way you want, reiterate through your code and refactor it. So I've created different variables for my hour, minute, and seconds, and I'm going to use all those variables here. So I'm going to shorten my code basically. So I'm going to use all this backticks, and instead of those functions, now I'm going to use R, and we need to call that pad function, right? So we need to pad our R also. Say suppose the R value is 1. So we need to show that 0, 1. Then I'm going to use colon and again pad minute and pad R. Sorry, I need to use second here. So this is, I'm using this pad function to add that padding. I'm going to save and go back to my application, refresh. See that? I think that scenario is not coming like it's a 3, 4, 34, 35. We need to wait for some time. So I'll come back to the clock. Okay. So this is what we targeted when we started this video, right? I want to show the reminder. Obviously, I need to show the reminder, and so I'm going to have a reminder object where I'm going to store the values for at what time I need to remind myself and what's the reminder for. So for that purpose, I'm going to create an object. So let's come back. See that now the 0 is coming, right? This padding is working. So let's put some reminders into our clock. So I'm going to pass that reminder value from outside from here. So I'm going to create a const reminder object, which is going to have time. So I'm just going to put some random value here, maybe like 15, 40 for now, or 50 for now. Okay. And we can use some seconds also, probably 0, 0. So this is a time when I want to get reminded, and like what's the reminder? So I'm going to put reminder will be, or I'm going to say time and task, maybe what task I want to do as a reminder, right? So that task will be like taking a break. Take a break, right? I like taking break. So take a break. And I'm going to pass this reminder as a prop. I think we don't need this R format for now. I'm just going to put reminder, and I'm going to pass reminder, this reminder object. So now our digital clock is taking reminder as input, and I'm going to use this reminder to remind me, right? So this is a good time. We have a scenario where we want to show the reminder, something like this. This is just a information purpose. This text is for the information purpose. So I want to show reminder like this, the time and the text. So I think this is a good opportunity to convert this into a component, right? So let's create a new component called reminder component. So I'm going to create a reminder component here, reminder.js. And this will be a dump component, functional component. So I'm going to import React from React. And let's create our functional component called reminder, which is going to accept that reminder object, right? So we're going to pass that reminder as, or I'm going to call it data. This will be the prop, actually, basically props. So I'm going to call this props. So it's going to accept the props, and it's going to return me that JSX, right? For the reminder. So I'm going to use a div here, and I'm just going to put reminder as a dummy text for now. And let me export this component default reminder. I can use this reminder component to show the reminder in my digital clock probably. So I can either use a digital clock, I can use app also, it all depends, but my digital clock has the time. So obviously my digital clock is going to show that reminder just below here. Okay, so I think a reminder component is ready. Now I'm going to use this component did update function because I need to check as the time is updating, right? I need to put that logic of checking the time. And when the time is equals to this time, the reminder time, I want to show that reminder, right? So let's put that logic inside this component did update, and I'm good as like this is the example I want to show you. So based on my state update, so say suppose you want to make some decision based on your state value, you can, and as the state is updating, as the time passed by, you can do all those changes inside component did update function. So let's do that. I'm going to put that logic here. And for the sake of simplicity, I know I have written that logic in my notes. I'm going to show you that logic. So here, update clock logic. So what logic we are going to write? We are going to check if the current time is equals to reminder time, right? So if they are same, right? If it is yes, I'm going to set a show reminder. Now show reminder is again going to be a state, and based on that state, if that show reminder is true, I'm going to show the reminder. So this is logic I'm going to put. So I need this state inside my digital clock first, show reminder. So let's create one more state value here called show reminder, because based on this show reminder values, initially I'm going to keep its value false. So based on the show reminder value, I'm going to show the reminder right here inside just below my clock. So I'm going to put my clock into a div. So I'm going to cut this code and put it here. And just below my clock, I'm going to put a conditional code. Now you're learning something new, a conditional code. So based on some value, say suppose you want to show something, so this is basically rendering your JSX based on a condition. So I'm checking for a condition here. If this dot state dot show reminder, if this is true, if the show reminder value is true, then only I'm going to show my reminder. Otherwise, there is no use of showing that reminder, right? So I'm checking whether this dot state dot share show reminder is true, then only I want to show my reminder component. So before doing that, I need to import my reminder component. So I'm going to import reminder from dot slash reminder, and we are going to use our reminder component. So first of all, let's not put any condition. Let's see if our reminder component is getting rendered. So I'm going to cut it and just show my reminder component by default. So I'm going to save. And if I go back to my application, see that I can see the reminder component. Now I'm going to put the condition here. So let me undo this. And now if show reminder is true, then only I'm going to show the reminder component. So now if I save, go back, you don't see the reminder here because the value of my state show reminder is false. Now somehow as a component is getting updated, inside component did update, we need to put that logic. Which logic? This logic. If current time, the time right now, is equals to reminder time. So this is the first thing we are going to check. This is the first condition we are going to check. So I'm going to put condition here. If how I can get current time? So I can get current time based on my state. So my state has the current time, and I'm going to call get time string only here. So maybe I can create a variable like current time is equals to this dot get time string, and I'm going to pass it this dot state dot time. Okay, so I'm going to pass this and I'm going to get the current time value, and we already have a reminder time also, but I'm going to take it from take it from my props current time and reminder time. So I'm going to create a new variable reminder time, and this is going to get the value from props. Like in functional component, if I go back, we get props as a argument, but in case of class component, this is something new. If you want to access the props, this is the way you access the props. This dot props. Okay, so you can access the props using this dot props, and I know inside my props I'm getting reminder, right? So when I'm creating a digital clock, I'm passing reminder as a prop to my digital clock, so I can access that reminder, and I am interested in the time value, right? So my reminder has something called time. So based on time, I'm going to show the task. So we have both the variable current time and reminder time. I'm going to use it. So let's go back to our logic. So we have the current time. I'm going to check whether current time is equals to reminder time. Let's do that. If it is equals to reminder time, let's do a console.log first. Time is same, something like this. I'm going to save and let's see like what's the time in the clock right now. So time.getHours is not a function. Time.getMinutes, get hours, get minutes. Okay, it is saying time and from where it is coming. And it is coming from component did update only. So I've called I passed this dot state dot time here to get time string. And it's showing this dot state dot time. Okay. Okay, so time is basically a string. So I think I need to pass new date here. So let me pass new date because that's what I'm showing right now. So I'm going to save it. Let's go back. Now the clock is ticking. The time is 15:28, 27. And what's the reminder time I have set? So if I go back and see my reminder time is 15:50, 15:28. Let me see 15:28 and let me set to 50 and save, go back. And when the time will match, see that time is same. So at that particular time, now I want to show the reminder, right? And how we are going to show the reminder? For that purpose, I have created this state variable. So I'm going to update the state again. So I'm going to make this show reminder true because it is false. That's why we are not seeing the reminder here, right? So obviously here inside, when the time is same, I'm going to remove this console.log and I'm going to set this dot set state. And inside that, I'm going to set my state of show reminder to true. And once the show reminder is going to become true, it's going to show me the reminder components. If I go back, I think again I need to say 2940. So go back and let's change it to 29, probably 30, 00. And let's see what happens. So when it will go to 30, that reminder should come here. See that? Something went wrong. So I see maximum update depth exceeded. This can happen when a component repeatedly calls set state inside component will update. See, there is nothing wrong in this code. The way we have written the code is wrong. So as I said, this component did update. When it so maximum call stack update means this component did update method is getting called again and again. And you need to keep in your mind whenever you are setting the state inside your component did update function, you need to be really mindful of writing the right code. Otherwise, this is going to happen. Maximum update depth exceeded because repeatedly we are setting the state. And if we go back to our update cycle, lifecycle method, whenever we set a state, render gets called. And because of that render, component did update gets called. This is what is happening repeatedly here, right? I'm setting the state by setting this show reminder value as true. Because of that, the render method is getting called. Because of that, the component did update is getting called. And this is happening repeatedly. That's why we are getting this maximum update depth exceeded. So somehow I need to manage the situation and I have written a logic for it. So if I go back to update clock logic, I'm going to check for the show reminder value also. That's my state value. So I'm going to check show reminder. If it is false, then only you show the reminder component. right? So I'm going to put some condition here. So I'm going to check. So first thing is I need to check for the current time and a reminder time. The next thing is inside this, I need to check for the value of show reminder also. So if this dot state dot show reminder is false. So basically I'm going to put a negation here. If it is false, and initially it is going to be false, right? So if it is false, then only you set this state. So I'm going to save it. And now if I go back and see my application, and let's put some reminder new value like 30 to 38 is going on right now. So I'm going to put 30 to 50 probably, and let's see. See that? I can see the reminder now. Why I can see the reminder? Because now I handled the situation. So once show reminder is true, this is going to become false, and this dot state is not going to get executed. Because of that, that maximum call stack render stack exceeded, that error, that warning, I'm not getting here because I have handled my situation and I have shown my reminder also. See that? So whenever you're updating your state inside component did update, you need to be mindful of the condition which you are writing here. So if you're writing this dot set state in your component did update, just be mindful of writing the proper code. You need to check for the state, you need to check for the props, you need to compare their value, and then only you're going to update your state. So this is really important. So I think our reminder is coming now. So we need to show that reminder. So in this case, I'm going to pass that as a, that reminder as a data. So, and I'm going to pick it up from this dot props dot reminder. So if you see, right, to my digital clock, I am passing reminder as a prop. So I can access that from the props using this dot props dot reminder. And you can see like digital clock is a parent component of a reminder component, and we are passing props to that reminder component using something called data as a prop. So this data will become prop for the reminder. Okay, so we are going to get props.data, and I'm going to show that here. So I'm going to again use my JavaScript, my JSX. So props.data.time. I'm going to show the time, and probably I'm going to use backticks here because obviously I need to show props data, then colon, and then I'm going to show props dot data dot task. I need to put this here. That's how it is going to work. I'm going to save. Now what's time? 35:24. I'll go back and change it to 35:50. Let's see. So let's wait till it is 50 seconds. See that? We are able to show our time and our reminder text also. So this is how you can manage, you can use different lifecycle methods. So let's have a quick recap of our different lifecycle methods. I'll go back to my lifecycle slide. So initially we had mounting, right? So there are three different phases: mounting, update, unmount, and we are going to talk about unmount in some time. So mounting is nothing but creating a new house. And in mounting stage, what happens? Constructor, render, and component did mount. These three different methods are getting called, and they have different purpose, right? When update stage gets triggered only when our component receives new props, or when our component state changes, or when we call the force update function. Then obviously, as we change the state or when we receive a new prop or we call the force update, it is going to call the render method. And because as we are calling the render method, this is a second time rendering, it is always going to call the component did update. And we can use component did update like how I have put the logic of showing the reminder there. You can also make server side calls here. And you can do such kind of thing like how I did here, right? I have used component did update to show my reminders. I think you get the idea. Like if you understood the point right, component did mount and component did update, these are the two functions you're going to use so many times while writing your React application. So just remember, component did mount gets called after first render, component did update gets called after each first render. I mean second, third, fourth, fifth, how many times each next render I can say. And think like update stage is like, repainting your house or recreating your house, right? So initially in the mounting phase, you create your house for the first time, and update stage is nothing but updating your house with new colors, new furniture, or new things, right? That's what I can give you the real world analogy. So I think I have covered mounting, I have covered updating. Now the next thing is unmounting that I wanted to cover. So let me quickly go back to my code and let me see if something is missing which I haven't explained to you. I think I should explain this dot set state to you, right? So inside my set state, I have two different values like time and show reminder. But here I'm just setting the show reminder to true. I'm not updating the time. So you must be thinking how this is working. So behind the scene, this set state function is handled by React. So it combines all the name value pair together and it puts into one object. So we don't need to worry. I can set state individually also. So I can set state of show reminder like this. Then I can set state for the time like this. I can do it independently. That's not a problem. So this is possible. The next point which I would like to cover is like we have called this set interval function inside component did mount. Initially it was in the constructor. So there is nothing wrong in writing this function inside constructor. You can do that. But as per the React community practice, we write such kind of thing like loading server side data. This kind of thing, we can write it in constructor, not a problem, but as a standard best practice, we use component did mount function for that purpose. So I think this is getting long. We have covered a lot of things here. This is a good time. Let's have a quick break. I've covered mounting and updating stages of component lifecycle. Let's cover the last stage, that is the unmounting stage, in the next part of the video. Let's have a quick break, come back, refresh your mind, and we'll continue. Welcome back. So now we know two different stages of React component lifecycle method. The first one is mounting. So think like mounting is like you're creating your house from scratch. So there are different functions which gets called when your components get created. And next one is updating. You can think like you're renovating your house, right? Means a repainting maybe, or putting new furniture into your house. So this is about updating phase. Now let's talk about the last major stage of our React component lifecycle called unmounting. That means basically you're destroying your house. I mean, I don't know whether we are going to destroy it or not, but I'm just giving it as an example. So destroying your house means when your component is going to get removed from the DOM, then this unmounting stage is going to get triggered, and it's really easy. I mean, just one method which gets called when your component gets unmounted. That's called component will unmount. And we can use this method to do some cleanup activity. And I'm going to give you the example of this. Like some of the example I can give you, like invalidating timers. Like in our digital clock, our clock is ticking, right? So we are using timer for that. That's set interval. So obviously we should clear the interval. That's really important. You can use this component will unmount for canceling network request also, and you can use for cleaning up at any subscriptions also. So I'm not going to cover these two examples. Probably I'll make a separate video about it, but I just wanted to tell you like you can use component will unmount for doing cleanup activity. Those cleanup activities can be many things, like some of the examples I have given here. So let's see component will unmount in practice. So to do that, first of all, so what I'm going to do basically, let me tell you, I'm going to remove this digital clock from my DOM, like what you see here. I'm going to remove it because when this digital clock component is going to get removed from the DOM, then only it's going to call that component before it gets removed from the DOM basically. So digital clock component, this component with this file is going to call that function. Component will unmount. So let me write that function first. Component will unmount, and this is where we are going to use all those cleanup activity, and I'm going to put console.log for now, and I'm going to just log unmount. So this unmount, this component will unmount is only going to get called when this digital clock is going to get removed from the DOM, from the browser. Like you see here, right? Let me refresh my page again. You don't see that unmount, right? Because the clock is still there. I cannot just go. Let me try this. Maybe I will inspect this clock and let me remove it from the DOM and let's see what happens. I am just trying to do something, delete element, something strange here. I don't see that unmount is getting called here. So we actually need to remove it through code basically. So let's do that. So to do that, I'm going to convert my app into a class component because right now my app is a function component and it's rendering the digital clock. To remove this digital clock, I need to put some condition here, right? Like how I have put the condition here. If you come back, I have created this show reminder state for showing the reminder, right? So when this show reminder state value is true, then only I'm showing the reminder component. I need to do something similar. So this is like a conditional block, right? I'm checking for a condition, and if that condition is true, then only I'm rendering the reminder component. I need to do something similar here. So when I say like show clock, then only digital clock will be shown. And if I say hide clock, obviously clock is going to get removed. And before the clock is going to get removed, this function component will unmount is going to get called. If I scroll up, this is where. So let's see it in action. So let's first convert our app into class component. So first of all, I'm going to import my component class from React, and I'm going to create it from scratch. Class app extends from component. And as you know, we need to write a render method here. We cannot directly return the JSX, and inside that render method, we basically return our JSX. So I'm going to copy this digital clock from here to here. Okay, and this is how I have converted my class functional component to class component. It's really easy. We just need to use class, the component name extends component, and we use a render method. Now I want to define my state here. So I'm going to, let me remove this component from here first because we have the class component now. I'm going to use constructor. And I need to check one thing. Okay, I didn't tell you about that. I'm going to tell you one more thing in this video, a part of the video. So constructor, so instead of writing constructor and passing props like this and then writing that super, it takes some time and then passing props to it. We can create our state without constructor also. So basically constructor is going to get created. That is something which is done by Babel behind the scene, and I'm going to show you actually. So let me see, I'm going to tell you how to define state directly. So you can define state directly like this. You can just create a state object and you can start creating your state values. You don't need to use constructor for that. Behind the scene, this code is going to get converted into constructor, definitely, but you don't need to actually write something like this, create a constructor, super props, and do all this. You can directly write state equals to, and I'm going to create one state value which is going to show and hide my clock. So I'm going to name it show clock. Or maybe, okay, I'll give it a name of show clock only. Initially, we will show the clock. So the initial value of my state will be true. Okay. And now I'm going to use this state here. And based on this state, my clock is going to be shown. So I'm going to use JavaScript syntax here. I'm going to cut this one from here and I'll say this dot state. Now here you need to write this dot state, not directly state dot show clock. If it is true, then show the digital clock. Let me press enter here just for the formatting purpose. So I'm saying this dot state dot show clock, then only show my digital clock. And I don't know if I'm getting any error here. This dot state, shall I need to write state only directly? So I have my curly brackets. Let me check the render method if I'm doing something wrong with my syntax. Okay, I got it. I think I was writing, I just need to wrap it into a div basically. That's why it is crying. So let me wrap this into a div. So we need a parent element basically to write, to put any component inside it. Okay, so you just need to wrap it into div. So this is wrapped inside a div. Let me let me give a tab here just for the formatting purpose. Now, if I go back, now my app is converted into class component. And if I refresh, I can see the clock, right? Now, I need a way somehow to make this state value false, right? And before doing that, I think I need to show you like how this works actually. This state is getting converted into constructor. So let me copy this code. So probably we'll use this app class only. I'll copy this. I'll go back to my browser. I search for Babel IO site and let's try it out. So I think this is okay. So I'm going to put some React code here. This one. This is what I'm using. See that? That state, that show clock is actually, so Babel is behind this. So actually you're not writing that code. Babel behind the scene convert that code into a constructor value. So basically you're saving time. This looks clean. So instead of us writing our constructor, Babel behind the scene, because this code, this React code basically passed through Babel first, and Babel behind the scene convert this code into JavaScript code, something like this. So you see that that constructor has been created by Babel. So we don't need to worry about it. Okay. So let's go back to our application now. So you know, like you can write constructor something, you can write state something like this. And now I need a way to change this show clock value to false. And how can I do it? So for that purpose, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to put a button here. Don't worry, you don't know button, how to use button. I'm going to talk about events also. We are going to cover events, forms, and everything in the upcoming video. So I'm just going to name this button as toggle clock. Okay. And probably I need to put this button outside here. So let me put this button here. And now if I save, I can see that button. Now that the button is not looking like a button basically. So let me, I'm going to keep it like this only. So think like this is a button only. I can see only text. I don't know why that border is not coming here. And so let's see. So now I'm going to put an event. Event is nothing but, you know, a trigger. Like when I click on this text, basically this is a button. So when I click on this, I'm going to change the value of this show clock. How can I do that? So there is an event and I'm going to talk about event in the upcoming video. Don't worry. You just focus right now on changing. I'm changing the value of show clock. I just want to show you, you want to focus only on component lifecycle, how I'm doing it, what I'm doing it. Basically what I'm trying to do here, you know, I'm trying to remove this clock so that I can show you like how component will unmount work. That's the thing which I'm trying to do. And for that purpose, I'm writing all of this code. So inside this, I'm going to write a function and this function is going to change the value of show clock. So I'm going to change the value by calling a set state function. And obviously we change state by calling a set state function. And here, let me have some, okay. Here I'm going to change the state and I'm going to assign a new state value of, so basically I'm going to toggle the state of my show clock value. So show clock is not this dot state dot show clock. So basically I'm toggling. So if the value of show clock is true, it is going to change it to false. If it is false, it is going to change it to true. This is what I'm doing inside this code. So when I click on the button, it's going to toggle the clock. That's going to change this value, the show clock value. So initially it is true. That's why the digital clock is rendering. When I make it false, this digital clock will not render. And because of that, we will see that component lifecycle triggered. That component will unmount is going to get triggered. So this function. So you will be able to see this unmount. Okay. So let me show you that. So I'm going to clear my console, refresh, and we'll start from the scratch. See, I can see that button part is coming, but somehow it is not showing here. Anyways, so let me refresh. So you see this render, update, render, update, render, update, everything is getting called. Now I'm going to click on the clock and just observe the console. See that? My unmount got called because the digital clock has been removed from the DOM. So before removing the clock, this function was called, right? So this is how you can trigger that component will unmount stage. Now, if I click back, my clock is back. So this is how you can achieve, and we can use this function component will unmount for doing some cleanup activity. So let me show you one example here, like the set interval we are calling, right? Because of that, we are changing the state at this time, and it should call a render continuously. Okay, let me refresh my application. Now you can see the render and update is getting called continuously. Now if I click on toggle clock, update on unmount, this is, but I'm getting some warning here. And basically I was thinking maybe render will get called continuously, but that's not happening. It's giving me the warning that can't perform a React state update on an unmounted component. This is no op, but indicate a memory leak. So basically what is happening, you know what React is trying to tell me with a warning that I haven't removed this interval. Where is that interval? I have written it inside component did mount. This set interval I haven't cleared, and the component has been removed from the memory, but still that interval is getting called. So React actually stopped rendering my clock or stop updating my clock, but it is giving me the warning that you should clear that interval inside component will unmount method. And we are going to do that. That's what I said, component will unmount we use for cleanup. So if you don't clean up all those intervals, all those timers, or all those event listener which we add, it's going to make your application buggy. So we use component will unmount for doing all those purpose. So I'm going to create one variable first of all. So I'm going to create this dot clock interval, or I can say tick interval. So I'm going to create a variable tick interval. I'm going to assign it a value of null. And when we call set interval function of JavaScript, it basically returns an interval value. This is a function, right? So it returns a value. So I'm storing that interval value inside this variable. Now I'm going to use this dot tick interval to clear my interval. And there is a function called clear interval which we use to clear the interval. So I'm going to clear the tick interval. I'm going to save my application now, my digital clock. Let me refresh. And now you see constructor render mount render update is getting called continuously. Now I'm going to remove my clock. See that warning is gone. Why that warning is gone? Because I have cleared my tick interval, which I was setting inside component did mount. So quick summary about component will unmount. So if you want to do such kind of cleanup activity, you can use component will unmount function to do invalidating timers, canceling network request, cleaning up any subscription. So let's have a quick recap around our, I think I have covered component lifecycle of React in detail. Let's have a quick recap. So there are three different stages. The first one is mounting, second one is updating, and third one is unmounting. This is what you need to keep repeating to yourself just to learn it, because this is very, this is important question, or this is widely used question in an interview also. Like people ask, tell me the component lifecycle of a React component. So there are three different stages you can tell: mounting, updating, unmounting. Mounting is nothing but creating a new house. So while the component gets created, there are three different functions which gets called constructor, render, component did mount. We use constructor for initializing the state. Render is obviously used for showing the UI based on the recent props and state. And after the first render, when first time the component gets render, component did mount function gets called, which you can use for making API calls. Like in our case, in our digital clock case, I have used component did mount for ticking my clock. You can write you can write this inside constructor also. You can make your server side calls inside constructor also. There is no restriction as such, but this is a good practice, community practice from the React world, which we follow. The next stage, the updating stage, triggers only when our component receives a new prop or the state changes, or we call this .force update function. Now, I haven't talked about this. Okay, but we need to focus on whenever we receive new props, whenever the state of a component changes. So it's like you're renovating your house, right? So you're updating your house. So how you're going to update your house? Maybe by painting, or maybe by bringing new furniture, right, into your house. So the props are changing, right? Or maybe the state are changing. So once the mounting phase is finished, if your state is not changing, then updating phase is not going to get called. But if new props are coming, or new state is, or you have set new state, then the render method gets called. And after render, it calls component did update, which tells us like, okay, now the component has been updated, do whatever you want. So we can use this second update, third, fourth, fifth, it depends on the props and state. We can use that to make more API calls based on the props or based on the state. And the third and the last stage of component lifecycle is unmounting. So I have shown you, like, when the component, before the component gets removed from the DOM, React calls component will unmount function, and you can use this component will unmount function to do cleanup activity. Like we have cleaned our timers, right? Set interval for a digital clock. And this is like, if I compare with real world analogies, like destroying your house. So this is about component lifecycle. The most widely used functions of component lifecycle I have explained. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think 5. So these are these stages, and these methods are mostly going to get used while you're going to write your real world application in your organization or for your hobby or whatever, these are the methods, or these are the stages you're going to use. There are other lifecycle methods also which are like not widely used. So there are some more methods which I'm going to talk about, I wanted to cover, but these are not like rarely used lifecycle methods. So these three: shoot component update, get derived state from props, get snapshot before update. These are not at all widely used method. But I'm going to explain it in a brief. I'm just going to talk about it. So let's take a quick break here, and I'll brief about all of these lifecycle methods also, so that if someone asks you, you should have answer for that. So let's have a quick break, and we'll talk about rarely used lifecycle methods of React class components. Welcome back. Now let's talk about some of the rarely used lifecycle methods. So in this video, I have covered most widely used lifecycle methods. So this is the last part of this video. I know this is a long video, but I'm trying to cover things in much detail. So you don't need to learn from anywhere else. But this is a topic where I was thinking what to do. I mean, shall I create examples about this rarely used lifecycle method? And like I thought maybe like they're not that much useful. Out of like 99% of time you're going to use these lifecycle methods only. So mounting, updating, unmounting, right? And constructor render component did mount, render component did update, and component will unmount. But maybe there are cases where you need to use this rarely used lifecycle methods. So I'm going to talk about those. So I'm just going to cover quickly about them. So say someone asks you about it in the interview, you should have answer. But you can honestly say, I don't know in detail. I haven't used in practice because I haven't used it. I haven't used all of these methods in practice. That's why, I don't have the examples to show you. And I can create any random example and show you to you, but there is no value in it. That's why, I just wanted to quickly cover around it. So let's get started with rarely used lifecycle methods. So there are three important methods: should component update, get derived state from props, and get snapshot before update. So these three methods, just try to remember it: should component update, get derived state from props, get snapshot before update. So again, I have my component lifecycle diagram here. So in the mounting phase, just before the render, and in the updating stage also. So in the mounting and in the updating stage, the method which gets called before render is called get derived state from props. So this is more of a replacement for component will receive props method, which was there in the previous versions of React. I don't know the exact version. So this is just a replacement of for this function. So I think I have used this function sometimes, but this is not at all useful. I think we can do it a lot of things in component did mount and component did update. So get derived. So say suppose I can tell you like when you can use this function. So this function gets called in mounting or in updating phase, okay, just before the render. So in mounting phase, just before the render, and in updating phase, just before the component should component update method. So what you can do using this method. So when you receive new prop or a state, and suppose you want to do something. So this function basically receives props and state as input. Okay. And you're thinking maybe based on this props and state, I want to create a new state. Okay. And you can return that new state to the render method or should component update method. So can be used to return new state based on the props or based on state also, I can say. So based on the input, like when you're configuring your component in the mounting phase, and when your component got updated, maybe you have received new props, and based on those props or properties, you're thinking maybe I need to create a new state for my component. So in that scenario, you can use get derived state from props method. So this is the first method which you can use based on props, return new state. So this function basically receives a props and state as input, and it can return a new state to the render method or should component update method. Let's come to the next method called should component update. Now React has a very good DOM diffing algorithm, or you might have heard about virtual DOM. Now I don't want to get into the details of that because that might be a bit complex for this video, but I have a video for it where I have talked about how React works behind the scene. That's a really popular video. I mean, that's the only video which is doing good for me. So you can watch that video. I'll post the link in the description. So should could component update you can use. So let's talk about it. Write your own logic to update or not to update your component based on new props or state changes. Okay, this is mouthful probably. So React handles the DOM update behind the scenes. React takes care of it. So when we receive new props or when we change the state, React does the comparison. So before rendering into the DOM, before showing into the browser, React do a checking about check around your props and state, and it creates a virtual DOM, and that virtual DOM gets rendered into the real DOM. Maybe it is complex. Okay, so you want to write your own DOM diffing algorithm, you want to write your own comparison algorithm, then in that case, you can use should component update. But I can tell you, React does that job very well, that comparison of DOM. I mean, the previous DOM and the current DOM. So you don't need to worry about it. I think you're not going to use this function until and unless React is doing something wrong. So this method should component update basically receives next props and next state as an input, and it returns a true or false value. So if you return true, it will call the render method and it will render your component. If it returns false, it is not going to render that JSX into the DOM. So I think this is a bit complex and I think you should avoid this method. I can directly say you should avoid this method. I think you don't need to use this method until and unless something complex you want to do with your props and state. And the last method which I'm going to talk about is get snapshot before update. So snapshot is nothing but your DOM, I can say, or your JSX also I can say. So this method gets invoked right before the most recently rendered output is committed to the DOM. It is not rendered yet. I told you, like, React creates something called a virtual DOM before rendering it into a real DOM. So this method get snapshot before update gets called. So before the component is rendered, before the component is shown into the DOM, before showing into the DOM, this method gets called. So probably you can use this method. It also receives previous props and previous state as input. So you can use these methods. This method get snapshot before update to maybe do something related to DOM, maybe scrolling or calculating the scroll position. These are some of the scenarios which I can think of right now. But these are not widely used methods, so I don't have a lot of, and I'm really sorry because I'm not giving you a proper practical example of this because there is no value in it. And if I see value in the future, if I start using these functions, I'll definitely come back with some examples. So get snapshot before update. This is more related to DOM. And if you want to do some calculations around DOM, probably, then you can use this method. So these are some of the rarely used component lifecycle method. For React component, should component update, get derived state from props, and get snapshot before update. So if you come up with any scenario, where you might have used, or if you already have knowledge about it, post in the comment, let me know. Even I want to upgrade my knowledge, but I haven't used these functions in my projects, so that's why I'm not covering. And I think these are not covered mostly in the blog post also. Some people have covered with some example, but they have also said, mostly these are not. These are like special case scenario methods. So this is about a rarely used lifecycle method. And I think we had a long journey about React component lifecycle. I tried to cover as much as possible. All the most important lifecycle methods I have covered in this video, and these are the methods you're going to use while writing your real world class component. So I think this is it for this video. If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit that bell button so that you can get the notification about my new video. I think day 4, I'm going to conclude our day 4 where we talked about lifecycle method of class components. Let's continue our journey of this learn React in 10 days. I'm going to come back in day 5 with new topic covered in depth. Till then, bye bye and take care.